Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into David Fincher's latest, The Killer. We're looking at it through a really insightful review by Mary Munoz from Moviescramble that came out back in November 2023. And our mission really is to unpack how this film kind of defies what you'd expect from the genre.
Yeah, it's a great source because, well, this film isn't what you typically think of as a hitman movie, is it? Munoz's review really gets into how Fincher plays with tension, the character, that meticulous detail. It's very Fincher, but different. So, yeah, let's dig into how he pulls that off, focusing on what makes it more than just, a revenge story.
Okay, so let's start right there because the review, it makes this really striking point right at the beginning. It calls The Killer probably the antithesis of what many have come to anticipate from the hitman's revenge kind of film. It talks about his stillness, how it goes against the character's own rules, his mantras, and just how, well, low-key it feels, almost celebrating the lack of big action scenes. The review even says it reminds us that being a hitman is a lot of waiting around and blending in. Yeah. So what's the effect of that, of taking that opposite approach?
Well, that's the fascinating part, isn't it? It sounds like it might be boring, but Munoz argues it's actually the opposite. She says it gives this interesting insight into the mind of its titular character. It really shows how this super controlled, meticulous life can just unravel. It's not like Selzen or Zodiac with all the gore or that kind of real-world dread. The Killer gives you something else, a different kind of intensity, more psychological.
Right, and that intensity, that sort of immersion, it feels like it's really driven by that specific narrative choice Fincher makes. Like, for huge parts of the film, we don't actually hear Michael Fassbender's character speak, do we? Instead, it's all this extensive voiceover pulling us right into his head. And it shows you his rigorousness, how everything is by the numbers for him, even his sleep schedule dictated by his watch. He even admits himself his job is quite boring, a lot of sitting doing nothing whilst trying to notice everything. How does that voiceover work technically?
Oh, it's absolutely key. That whole opening section, maybe 20, 30 minutes, the voiceover makes it feel like, well, the review calls it a heightened version of Hitchcock's Rear Window.
Yeah.
And you're right there with the killer watching this Paris apartment building from like an empty WeWork office. You're noticing the comings and goings, who's switching lights on, who's going out to eat. All that detail. It's not just telling you the plot. It really forces you into his detached way of seeing the world. The review nails it. All he does is watch and wait for the perfect moment.
And then just as you're locked into that waiting game, that tension, boom, Fincher flips it. The review says he plunges us all into chaos when the hit goes wrong. And that's when the killer just throws out his rule book, right? Ditches most of his own self-imposed rules to go after revenge. But Munoz makes this strong point that the opening sequence is the best of the film. She calls it fraught with tension and yet imbued with nothingness. So if the best part is defined by nothingness, how does the rest of the film keep you hooked? How does it maintain that slow burn?
It's really interesting how he does it. The review captures that feeling of constant anticipation, saying there's rarely a moment in this film where you actually feel like you can breathe, except maybe for that one scene driving down a sunny Dominican coastal road. But mostly, no breathing room. And we get trained, just like him, to always be watching. You find yourself scanning everything on screen, looking for clues, for threats. It feels very deliberate. Fincher is clearly enjoying teasing us, as the review puts it. That obsessive detail, it's classic Fincher, but here it is, the tension mechanism. He makes you complicit in the watching.
Which makes the title almost ironic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The lack of actual, killing action. The review points this out. There are a couple of low-key violent deaths and one rather chaotic hand-to-hand combat sequence, which seems ridiculous for a film with this name.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a John Wick-style showcase of violence.
Not at all.
But the review argues it doesn't actually need that big action stuff because it's about the small details, about waiting, about doing nothing. So if it's not about the action, where's the power coming from in those confrontation scenes?
Yeah, that's a really sharp observation in the review and key to Fincher's approach here. Even when he's face-to-face with people, the killer rarely utters more than a sentence or two. Right. He just lets their fear speak, their panic, their begging. And that creates this hugely impactful power dynamic. It's really effective. And visually, it's reinforced by how Fassbender is often shot from below or in extreme close-up. Those low angles give him dominance, right? And the close-ups just trap you. It makes the violence, when it does happen, feel weirdly personal. The review says his killings feel way more intimate than they have any right to be.
Intimate. That's a good word for it. And that extends to the whole feel of the film, the aesthetic. Like the soundtrack, mostly the Smiths, which, as Munoz notes, somehow works with the somber tone of the character. It's odd, but true. And Fassbender himself. always in beige and gray, so distinctly normal, unremarkable, just someone you would walk past in the street without paying too much attention to. And his performance is so moody, taciturn, barely any emotion in his voice. How does all that contribute?
It all feeds into this meticulous construction of the character and his world. That whole mundane look, Fassbender's flat delivery. It supports this idea of the banality of what he does. He's not some flashy movie assassin. He's chillingly, efficiently normal. And it loops back to that core theme: routine, method, precision. Even when he seems to ditch his rules for revenge, that underlying notion of precise routine and methodical execution, as the review says, it never truly leaves us as viewers. Fincher trains us to look for it, seeking the detail out in every single inch of the screen. The detail is the spectacle here, not the explosions.
Yeah, you really do start scanning everything. Though Mary Munoz does acknowledge, look, this might not be for everyone. She says it may well prove to be too much of a slow burn for some, or maybe even feel a bit too revenge drama by numbers for others, despite its unique approach.
Sure, those are fair potential critiques mentioned, but overall the review concludes that The Killer stands as yet another fascinating piece of work from the mind of David Fincher. It really shows his knack for twisting genres and making us engage differently. It's definitely worth checking out. If you haven't, it's streaming on Netflix now.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the big picture seems to be Fincher using all these tools detail, that constant voiceover, the slow pace, to really flip the script on the hitman thriller. It becomes less about the external violence and much more about observation, about this guy's internal world unraveling, and the sheer power in just being present and watchful. It feels like the real insight is how he makes the lack of expected action the main source of the film's tension.
Exactly. And that leaves us with something to think about, perhaps. How often do we maybe overlook tiny, seemingly mundane details in our own lives or in what we watch that actually hold deeper meanings? And think about routine. How much does a strict routine define us? And what happens when it breaks? Does it change our whole purpose? Or even, the power of silence. How sometimes saying less or doing less overtly can actually create a stronger presence. What are the small details that you notice, maybe things others miss, and what hidden stories might they be telling?